Our speaker will share his experience, strength, and hope for approximately 45 minutes. We ask out of respect for our speaker to please remain seated until he has finished. It is my pleasure to introduce my speaker for the evening. This is Mike Bennett.
He's already speaking.
Thank you, sir. I was talking. I know you were. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Bennett. I'm an alcoholic. What a great group. I was a little bit sleepy all day because I stayed up till like 12:30 last night, which I go to bed at 8:30 every night, so that was a long time for me. But it wasn't intentional. It wasn't because of New Year's. It was because I was at Chino Valley giving a talk last night, and they didn't have any decaf. And I thought, well, I love having a cup of coffee when I'm giving a talk, so yeah, it might make me a little restless, but I'm going to go have a cup of coffee. And yeah, I was up until 12:30, and then I was up at 2:30, and then I was up at 3:30 and 4:30 and 5:30 because I didn't sleep from 2:30 on, so I got about 2 hours worth of sleep, and I was kind of tired today, and I took a little nap for about half an hour and ate a little bit, and then I thought, well, I'm feeling a little bit better, so I'll start thinking about getting ready for the meeting after a while. My wife said, well, do you want to go sit in a hot tub? Because, you know, it's like, I don't know, 30 degrees outside. I said, yeah, absolutely. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Now I'm very sleepy, so. And the funny thing is I had COVID right after Thanksgiving. The day after Thanksgiving, I came down with COVID, and my temperature has not been working right since then. I've recovered from it as far as symptom-free and all of that, but sometimes it's like I'm having hot flashes like a woman who's had a hysterectomy or reached the change of life. My wife thinks it's very entertaining. She just lost her smell and her taste, but me, I've turned into a woman. Yeah. So. Nice. So. Derek, happy birthday, 28 years. Nice to see you newer people staying active. I knew him from the first day he came into AA, and it's funny, he was in Chino last night, and he came up to him and he said, do you remember me? And he didn't have a beard last time, so I remember if he did, it wasn't gray, so I didn't remember him because it's been probably 15 years since I'd seen him. And he told me who he was, and I had to stare at him for a minute to say, and then it finally started coming around, and I thought, well, I'll be damned. And so we got reunited last night, and it was so much fun, so I'm glad to see you here and celebrating your birthday. And I do understand tragedy within sobriety, and anybody that stays sober very long will learn that life doesn't quit happening just because we're sober. I remember my sponsor saying to me many times before he died, it doesn't matter how long we're sober or how much work we do or how many people we sponsor, how many steps we practice and principles we apply to our life, we never stop, we never rise above human being. And human beings are still out here experiencing life. And what the difference is we learn the tools to deal with life as it comes at us and stay sober and find a way to still maintain some level of dignity and pride and still live in love with everybody, because we do have that choice. So, and Carrie quit her job so she could be here, so she's one up on you. Right, yeah. Anyways, so somebody said earlier, so well, you gave a talk last night, and you're giving a talk tonight, so you give 2 talks in 2 days, and you know, that's kind of unusual. Not so much. Every once in a while you'll go some places where they'll have you, like a Friday night speaker will have you come talk at their meeting, and then you'll stay in a hotel and then go speak Saturday night because they pool their expenses so they can afford to fly you in somewhere, so it's not that unusual. One time I did get to speak twice in one night, though. That was kind of fun. I got to go somewhere at 5:30 and give a talk from 5:30 to 6:30, and then I had to race across town to get to somewhere at 7 and give a talk from 7 to 8. And luckily, there was only one person who had heard both talks, and he was driving me, so that worked out pretty good. So, yeah, he was the host. So, anyways, I don't have any idea what I'm going to talk about. It's glad to see Beth and Dan here. It's funny, some years ago, when I first moved back to Prescott, I'll tell you why I was gone, probably, I imagine, but when I first moved back home here to Prescott about 4.5 years ago, we were having this meeting at the VA theater building on the VA dom, or on the VA property on the east side of town, and it was I was probably twice as big as it is here, this group, but there were so many people that attended that meeting then, and we all had our own seats, and everybody had their part to play and their place, and it was just wonderful, and we all attended every single weekend. And then COVID hit, and they kicked us out of there, so we all scrambled around. This meeting actually didn't get held for some time, and then we moved it here and restarted it. But a lot of those people didn't come back yet. They're either still out with COVID. Some of them, unfortunately, died, which was very, very sad from COVID. And some of them just died because they were just old and died. And I imagine a few people move. I mean, that does happen. You get old enough, eventually, you just like you give out, right? But I don't know why that's so funny. Mean some bitches in here, boy. Yeah. I wonder what they're going to say when I tell them I have a wooden leg. They'll probably laugh at that too. I don't know. So I don't actually have a wooden leg, but you'd probably laugh at it if I did, wouldn't you? So, anyways, if I get gangrene later, I'll call all of you and share it with you so you can get a kick out of that. Anyways, I don't see as many people on their phones tonight, so there must not be a ball game going. A couple of weeks ago, I was secretarying somebody, and everybody's on their phones, and I don't remember who was playing, but there was something going on, and they were all watching a football game. So, now, John has been our secretary for the last year, and I do want to point out this. There's been an election, and Tony, who's been doing the Zoom, is going to take over as secretary, and they're going to do the handoff next week and do it officially. But John wanted you to believe while he was making mistakes up here and screwing up that it was because he had done this too long. But those of us who were here in the beginning know that he was screwing it up at the first day. He's done this all year. That's no different from him. He's just been kind of stumbling through it the whole year. So, but everybody who had a commitment at this meeting in the last year, would you raise your hand? Thank you. Some of you didn't raise your hand, and I know it's like, I know you think to yourself, because I'm looking at some of you who had commitments here and didn't raise your hand, and I know you're thinking, well, I'm one of these AAs that my humility, I don't want to get attention. Bullshit. What that is about, it's selfishness, because we're trying to set a good example for new people, so when they see that we're in service and we're staying sober long term and we're happy doing it, we're trying to set example. So let's do that again. Everybody who had a commitment here, let's not be selfish son of bitches, and let's raise our hands to show the new people that this thing really works, okay? Very good. Much better. Thank you for that. This thing really does work. I got sober January 26, 1992. That was Super Bowl Sunday, and it makes me 29 years sober. And if I don't screw it up, there are no fronts, but if I don't screw it up by January 26th of next month, or this month actually, because we're in my birthday month now, I kind of get screwed on that every year, because I was told when I was new that you get to take advantage of the entire month you got sober in to go to different meetings and announce your birthday. And so Derek can go to, 29 more meetings and maybe 2 a day and get all of them in and announce your birthday if you want. I got sober on the 26th, so I got screwed. I have 4 days. I have to scurry around and get up early and go to the 6:30 meeting and then the 10 o'clock meeting at noon and then the 5:30 and the 7. And, I got 4 days to wear that out if I want to. I won't do that, but I could if I wanted to. But the rest of you, like him, he just has 30 days to announce it. But anyways, so don't you think John has done a good job as our secretary, though? I like picking on him. One thing I'm very happy about having COVID, probably the only thing I'm happy about, is my collar is not so tight. It was nice to lose a little bit of weight, because last year when I talked up here, I felt like my head was going to pop off because I had gotten a little bit fat. I don't know if I'll be able to keep it off now that I'm well again, because I'm starting to like the taste of pie. It's coming back, so. But anyway, so I grew up down in South Phoenix, and I was in and out of the foster care system until I was about 12 years old. And then at 12 years old, I went into permanent foster care with some people up in Mayer here, and they moved me out of South Phoenix. And I moved from the streets of South Phoenix to like a little ranching community, and started learning how to be a cowboy and ride a horse and played cows and followed them around and build fence and do all the stuff that they do in ranches, which was very foreign to me because I'd never seen a horse or cow live, except, just on TV. I don't think I'd ever seen one up close, and so it was a lot of fun. And it really was a fun transition to go from that life. And people say, you always say I grew up in the foster care, the system, and people always, at some point, they'll look at you and say, oh, that's sad, and that must have been hard stuff. And not so much. People, all kids that grew up in the system like we did, unless they were abused, which I was not. Nobody ever molested me while I was in a foster home or when I was in a state facility. And as far as kids fighting, hell, that happens on playgrounds with my grandchildren and my children, when they're little kids anyways. That shit just happens. It's part of being a child and kids being mean to each other. But it wasn't so bad. The worst part for me was when I had to go back home and live with my biological parents again, because those people were crazy, and I mean that quite sincerely. They didn't mean to be crazy, and they didn't even know they were crazy, but there was something wrong with them. They were just off. My mother had this perception of reality that was delusional, and my dad was the angriest man that I ever knew in all of my life. I never met anybody as angry as he was. And even them, they weren't violent to the point of abusive and beating us. I mean, my dad would take a belt to us if we didn't do what he told us to, and he wouldn't think anything about it, because back then, that's just what parents did. If you misbehaved, they knocked the shit out of you, and you straightened up, or you got the shit knocked out of you again. And it was not child abuse then, it was parenting. And maybe if we had a little more knocking the shit out of kids today, we wouldn't have the bullshit we have in the world right now, right? And I shouldn't tell this story. I really should not tell the story. But I was traveling when I lived away for about 12 years. I moved away for a job, and I was gone for about 12 years, and I would come home on the weekends. And my grandchildren, 3 of my grandchildren, lived on the same property with my wife and I. We had a house, and on the back of the property was another house, and our kids lived there. Travis and his kids, and he has an autistic boy, and Jake is one of these kids. He's about that big, and it used to drive his parents crazy because their other kids, they could rock them to sleep like normal babies and stuff, but Jake was just wired different, and he just would sit there and be awake the whole time, and they'd struggle with him. Finally just let him go, and there he'd go. And I'd come home on the weekend, and Jake crawl right up in my chair with me, go right to sleep. I just drove him crazy because he loved me, and I loved him too. He's a great kid. But one day I come home, and I'm like in the back room doing something, and I can hear him screaming. He's in the kitchen, he's screaming, and he's hitting himself in the head like this, and I come around the corner, and I didn't think about autism report. I hit him in the forehead. I went, bam, knock that off. And then I looked around to see, is any of the other people around, see me do that, because I realized you probably should not smack a kid in the head if he has autism. But anyways, so training, it's just training. But anyway, so Jake put his hands down like that, and he got these big eyes, and he ran off, and he's never done that since. So, maybe you should abuse autistic kids. I don't know, so he's better. So, anyways, he still loves me, though. And I never have smacked him on his forehead again, because I don't want to get caught. Anyways, the stupid shit we do, huh? And but anyways, I grew up in the system, and then when I was 12 years old, I moved in with these people up here around Mayer on this little ranch, and they were the most kind people in the world. She was a retired behavioral modification expert. That was her career, and she was grandparent age to me, and he was a career Army man, airborne ranger, and the coolest dude I ever met in my whole life. He was just cool, and there was no way around it. And he was not a guy who suffered from anything. He was just a cool son of a bitch that was in the war, and he fought 2 tours in Korea, 2 at Vietnam, and he was at the Revolution of the Dominican Republic and had 72 paid air combat jumps in his career, and he was I just idolized him. I thought he was the swellest guy. And he told me that he was an atheist. Told everybody he would. And if the people would show up, that knock on your door and they want to come in and preach to you about their religion. I don't even remember what religion that is. Who is that does that? Oh, yeah. Hell, he would invite him in. He would invite him in and make coffee. He wanted to talk to them. And by the time he was done, they wanted to leave. They didn't want to stay anymore, because he loved to get engaged in those type of deep conversations about religion and stuff. And he could make a case because he had done his research. But anyways, he always said he was an atheist. And so because I idolized him and I had never went to church, I didn't know anything about God or about church or anything, so I just decided I was atheist too. And I didn't know until after I was in AA a little while that I don't think I ever really made a conscious decision based on any information, valid information at all, except he was atheist and I wanted to be like him. And so I kind of stood my ground that that's the way I was. And I remember I was drinking, and how many people here are less than a year sober? Raise your hand, will you? Oh, quite a few. That's a lot. So if you're new, you're probably like me when I was new, and you've had people say things to you like this. Michael, if you would stop drinking, your life would get better because drinking's your problem. And I had more people say that to me starting from the youngest age. When I was about 9 years old the first time I got high, and I didn't mean to get high. I was on the playground, and this kid walked up to me with a balled up sock, and he said, "Sniff this." And even I knew you shouldn't sniff another kid's socks, but I don't know why, so I did, and it turned out I was huffing paint, and I got high, and I wound up in the principal's office, and I kind of liked it, so I did it again. I wound up there again, and that's the way it started. And then not long after that, probably by the time I was 10 or so, I was smoking weed on the back of the playground with the other kids. You could buy a joint back then for 50 cents, and you think, well, damn, that's cheap, but it's probably equivalent to whatever they cost today. I don't know. Everything seems to be the same. Seems to equal as time goes on. There's people sitting on the floor. There are chairs up here in the front. There's like 5 chairs if you guys want to not sit on the floor. Now, if you're sitting on the floor to be unique and stand out for attention, please stay there. That's okay. Not necessary if you want to be comfortable. Anyways, so it started out with that, and then after a while, there was no place left for me to live in Phoenix. My parents had gotten in trouble with CPS, and they had taken me off somewhere, and then I was supposed to go back, and then they were getting in trouble again. So before CPS grabbed me, they sent me to Oklahoma to live with my aunt and uncle and my cousins. When I got out there, those people, I had 5 cousins and boy cousins, and on Friday night after school and work and stuff, we'd load up in the back of their pickup, and we'd drive to town, and they would get Coors beer, and we'd just drive back and forth on the strip. And it was just the stupidest thing in the world, because we went from Sonic to 7-Eleven, and then we turned around and went from 7-Eleven to Sonic, and we just did that for, I don't know, hours, and drank beer, which was wonderful because I loved the effect that drinking alcohol had on me. And they always talked about, we're going there to pick up girls. We never talked to a girl ever, and I did that the whole summer. Not one time. We just drove back and forth on the thing and drank. But here's what happened with me when I drank, and I told this story last night, so 2 of you are going to have to endure it again, because 2 people from here were there in Chino last time. But you have to think about it like this. Is anybody in this room never watched Wizard of Oz? I think everybody has seen the show Wizard of Oz, right? The movie? My old sponsor who just died, he used to tell this story, and I think it is the most descriptive way to explain alcoholism to a non-alcoholic of any other way in the world that I've ever heard it described in all the years I've been sober. You have to imagine that being sober for somebody like me, I'd go drink while we were running up and down the strip, and man, this magic would happen, everything would be wonderful, and then we'd be sober all week. And it was just miserable, and I couldn't wait till Friday night, and we'd start drinking again, and that magic would happen. The way he described it, he said, you have to imagine that sobriety is like living in Kansas, where the wind's blowing, it's black and white, it's dull, and dusty. That's life sober. But then, about halfway through my second drink, everything comes together, and Technicolor starts to appear. And there are yellow brick roads. There are flying monkeys. There's a tin man and a lion that talk, and somebody has a heart and a brain, I don't know. But it's exciting. Now, there's a wicked witch to deal with, but who gives a shit? Because it's better than living in Kansas. So we drink for the effect produced by alcohol, and non-alcoholic people don't understand it, but those of us who drink and have that happen, we understand it, because that's what happens about halfway through my second drink. May not happen in the same place for you, but somewhere along there, we have the same impact, or the same effect. So people would say to me, Mike, all the trouble you're getting in and such an asshole you are, drinking's your problem. If you stop drinking, your life will get better. Well, after you get enough heat on, you start thinking, well, maybe they're right, so you try to stop and you try to cut off, and you do, and you think, well, maybe they were right, because you start sleeping a little bit, you eat a little bit, you start taking showers, and showing up for work, and stuff starts going normal, and you think, well, maybe they were right, drinking's my problem. But very gradually, without even noticing it, life begins to just gray out just a little. We don't even see it coming, but the Technicolor gets a little less Technicolor. And then before long, it's just black and white again, and then it's dusty, and the wind's blowing, and it's dull. And how long can a guy like me live with that before I absolutely have to have a drink? And that's what kept happening to me. I tried to be a good boy. I tried to understand what they were telling me, and I tried to do what I was told. But after a period of time, I knew that my case was different. They did not understand that drinking was not my problem. Drinking was my solution. Being sober too long was my problem. So eventually I would drink again. And I would try to control it. I would try not to get in trouble with it. I would try to, Work out like the book talks about. Don't drink too many. Don't drink too many nights. Try to not drink the wrong stuff. I heard somebody the other day say, well, I don't drink hard liquor. I just drink, you know. And non-alcoholic people don't think like that. It never occurs to them. Non-alcoholic people never occurs to them to count their drinks. They just don't even think about it. So anytime somebody tells you that, well, I don't have a drinking problem because I don't drink hard alcohol. Well, anymore. Yeah, there's probably a guy with a drinking problem right there, because non-alcoholic people, they don't give a shit. They just, when they want to drink, they have a drink. So anyways, so I got married while I was drinking the first time, and it didn't last very long because I continued drinking. She thought I was very exciting in the beginning, and because she grew up with her parents and her brother, all very stable people. Nobody drank, nobody did anything wrong, and they were very structured, and it was very dull. And then when she met me, she was in her first year of college, and I was this exciting. By then, I was a cowboy, and I was riding in the rodeo a little bit, and team roping, I was doing stuff. And she was a barrel racer, and she just fell in love with me. She thought I was the cutest thing ever, and I was exciting and running around, getting drunk and dancing and singing and stuff. But after she was married to me a couple of years, the new wore off of that, and she got pregnant, and she decided I wasn't as much fun as she thought I was, and she really needed somebody stable and reliable to help her raise her child, and she eventually divorced me. And I was also kind of a savage. I never laid my hand on a woman ever. Not that I was not capable of it. It just I never got pushed far enough or provoked enough to ever do it. I got close a few times, but I was a hell of a door slammer, and I was a screamer, and I'd throw a coffee cup across the room and bust it, and I'd slam doors so hard I'd bust them right off of their goddamn hinges, you know. I mean, I was just a savage little bastard, and I terrorized her emotionally, and she finally got to the point where she wasn't willing to live with me anymore, and she finally divorced me. And you know, the only thing that went through my mind when she divorced me? Finally, I can drink the way I want. I knew I was going to miss my daughter. I knew I was going to miss her because she was a good mom and a good wife, but finally, I can drink the way I want, because all of the time living with her, I had to try and control my drinking somehow because it was out of hand. And sometimes I would call her from the bar, and I'd say, listen, listen, you. I'm going to come home, but only if you don't yell at me. If you're yelling at me, I'm staying here till this image closes. And some of the times she would say early on, well, no, I won't. I want you to come home. I don't want you to stay on it. Come on home. So I'd come home drinking, and I'd just keep drinking until I passed out at home. But after a while, she got to where I don't give a shit what you do. and then she'd lock the door and go to bed. And so I'd drive home, and sometimes I would just pass out right in my truck. And we had this long porch, and sometimes I'd make it about halfway up the porch, and that's where they'd find me in the morning. Sometimes I'd make it to the door. I don't know. But it didn't matter because she was already in bed with the door locked. She got tired of me and divorced me. So I left that night, and that she kicked me out. I loaded all my stuff, and I drove up to Wickenburg. We were living down in the West Valley, and I drove up to Wickenburg, which is a little country town south of here. That's pretty cool if you haven't been down there to visit. And I met a bartender and was going to marry her immediately, you know, because she drank. And before long, I did marry her. And it only took me, matter of fact, in order to marry her, I had to go down to sign the papers with the first wife to divorce her in order to marry the second one, and the second one babysitted while we went down and signed the divorce papers, which the first wife still never forgiven me for. And so, anyways, so I thought because this woman drank the way I drank, we would be okay. We would be able to get along. Well, you know, any of you that have had experience with that didn't turn out so well, because she drank like I did. Now there were two savage people in the relationship, and she was just as savage as I was, and it was just a terrible, terrible nightmare that we went through. And for 3 or 4 years, it was just like we were getting separated and divorced every week. It was just the most volatile, crazy thing. And then we would panic, one of us, and we'd get back together, and then we'd get divorced. And Rick and a few people here knew my ex-wife, and she's actually sober in the program now. I haven't seen her since I've been back, but I understand she's sober 6 or 7 years. I'm really glad she did. But I was just about ready to divorce her, really to leave and be gone for good, because I'd gotten sober. Or just about ready to get, or she had got pregnant, and that's what it was. I was going to divorce her, and she got pregnant. When she got pregnant, then the sense of responsibility hit me. I'd already abandoned one wife and a child, and I didn't want to be a person who did that again. So I decided to stay, and we had the baby. And then he was born on Christmas Day, 1991, and I got sober January 26th, a month later, 1992. So he had a month's sobriety on me till he got to be about 11. And then I passed him right by. And I told him from about 8 on, I said, let me know when you have your first drink. I'm really looking forward to that, because I do not like you having more sobriety than me. And he was a great, yeah, he was a great kid. Him and I just had such a great relationship, and I really did love him. He was a great kid. But anyways, so we had that baby, so we tried to stay married for the baby, like you would, and out of obligation and desperation from the last failed marriage, and it was difficult. But I was sober now, and I started going to AA. But if you'll notice, if any of you are in a relationship or married, you start going to AA, and you start getting better, and you start wanting to go to AA, you might find, as I did, and many people that I've known, and the book even has written about it, your spouse will start to get a little bit jealous, because AA starts to do something for you that they couldn't. And it really does rub them the wrong way, and they start wondering why you go to so many meetings. So that caused friction with us. Something interesting she said, though. She quit drinking to be pregnant, didn't want to drink while she was pregnant. But when I got sober right after he was born, she said to me, do you think it would help you stay sober if I didn't drink? And she didn't have any idea she was an alcoholic. She never, in my experience, had any drinking problem back then. And she didn't believe she did. And I said, well, it might. I don't know. It might. And I didn't have a sponsor then to ask, so I just said it might. So she didn't drink. So she didn't drink until after we got divorced. She stayed sober that whole time. She got more and more miserable as the years went on. We finally went to some marriage counseling at one point, and the marriage counselors, it turned out, happened to be a long-term sober lady in AA who also worked for Catholic Social Services, and we went to her for marriage counseling. And she listened to us a few times, and she said to her, if you don't go to Al-Anon, I'm not going to see you guys anymore because you need Al-Anon. And I thought, oh, that's kind of a mark in my corner, because I thought she'd go to Al-Anon. And all I did was get my ass chewed out all the way home because she said, that somebody's from AA, that lady, and you guys set all this up, And of course, we didn't set it up. I'd never seen that lady in AA ever. But she started going to AA or Al-Anon. She hated it, absolutely hated it. But she just forced herself to go. And after a couple of weeks, months, she started to love Al-Anon. She fell in love with the people. And then we started going. We had what I thought was going to be a very, very happy relationship. She was in Al-Anon. I was in AA. I was sponsoring a lot of people, and she was sponsoring people. But there was this one man I was sponsoring, and I had him come to my house and for a picnic because we did these weekend functions all the time, stuff, and I had him there for a picnic barbecue, and he fell in lust with my wife. I didn't know this at the time, but they really hit it off well. And he found out she was in Al-Anon, so he joined Al-Anon because he had heard people talk about being a double winner, and he got her to be his sponsor. And I couldn't really say anything about that because I was sponsoring women at that time. And so she was sponsoring him there, and after a while, they started having an affair. And I'll tell you, when a man you sponsor is having an affair with your wife, it does interfere with your spiritual condition just a little. Especially if you've heard his fifth step. And I did quit sponsoring him after a while. Anyways, so that marriage ended in divorce, and then I didn't know what to do about that. So I just decided to devote myself to recovery and my kids. I had 2 kids by 2 different women by then, and I really didn't want to get involved and have any more kids. But somebody fixed me up about a year and a half after I was divorced. Somebody fixed me up with a lady who was not an alcoholic, and she was a hairstylist, and she was buying a car at the dealership I worked at. By then I was working in a car dealership and had been most of my sobriety. And she came to the dealership to get the car, and they kind of fixed us up because the husband of the pair worked at our dealership, and the wife at the pair got her hair done by this woman at the salon. So they hooked us up, and we started going out. And we hit it off immediately, just instantly we hit it off, and we dated for a long time. She was an interesting woman, unlike any woman I'd met before, and she still laughs at me to this day. She thinks that if a woman doesn't jump in bed with me right away, I think if a woman doesn't jump in bed with somebody right away, that there's something wrong with the woman. And she said, you AA people don't understand that the women that don't jump in bed with a man right away are actually the healthy women that you guys all wish you had. But you think there's something wrong with them, so you quit them for the girls that are still in trouble, and looking for the same thing you're looking for. And so her and I dated for several months, and she wouldn't sleep with me. She wouldn't let me meet her children, and she wouldn't let me know where she lived. We would just meet at a restaurant or a movie or something in separate cars and go on. I remember about our 3rd date, I opened her car door for her because I'm a gentleman when I'm trying to get laid. I open her car door, and she gets in, And as I shut her car door, she rolls her window down, and I think, well, I just reach in to give her a kiss, and she rolls the window right back up on my face. And I thought, I'm pretty sure this woman doesn't like me. And later she still laughs about me saying that, because the truth was she just was still getting to know me a little bit, and a little too soon for that. But eventually we started getting along, and we got married, and we've been married now for 22 years, and very, very happy. Yes, and I'm very happy. The happiest marriage I know. I don't know anybody that has a better relationship than my wife and I do. And for years she went to AA with me, because she wanted to learn about alcoholism. She'd come to open speaker meetings like this, and I'd either be a secretary, or I'd be speaking, or I would be doing something. I always had a commitment doing something. So she'd sit in a meeting, kind of watch all the activity, and got to know everybody. And I know Rick knows her very well. Carrie knows her. Who else knows Shelley that's in here? There's quite a few people. Yeah, Reed. Anyway, she's just the most wonderful woman, absolutely the most wonderful woman. But after about 10 years of doing this, be it watching me in AA and stuff, she got bored, because she's not an alcoholic, she's not an Al-Anon, she's just a normal, well-adjusted person. Matter of fact, she even drinks every day. I'll go home, and about, 6:30, she'll finally mix up a little drink, and she'll go sit in her chair and have her drink. And the next morning, I make coffee in the morning, so I'll make my coffee and hers, and I'll go set hers down. But I always have to set mine down first, because hers still has a half-finished drink on the coaster from the night before. So I pick that up, and I put her coffee down, and then I go pour it out. And I always think the same thing. Fucking amateur. I mean, how else do you treat people like that? You talk about alcohol abuse. That's alcohol abuse. You let perfectly good booze go stale, and let the ice melt in it and shit. So anyway. So I just pour it out, and then we go on with our day. But she's just a normal. I think I've seen her drunk, like seriously drunk, 2 or 3 times in 22 years. Well, and we dated for a year before we got engaged, too, so longer than that. But anyways, and I didn't like her much when she was drunk, because she says everything she thinks about me when she's drunk. And if she'd been mad at me for 5 months and I don't know it, I'll know that night. Yeah, she just saves it up for a couple of drinks. And then, anyway, she's a lovely lady. We had... She brought 2 boys to the relationship, and I brought a boy and girl to the relationship. So, but anyways, when I was about, I want to say my first year in sobriety, I was still struggling with this atheist believing in God thing. Because once you commit to something, even if there's no basis for fact or reason to make a statement like I'm an atheist, once you commit to something, there is some obligation for people like me, and I assume you, to stick to your guns, even if it kills you, even if you know you're wrong. You just got to ride it out. And I struggled with that atheist thing for a while. But I was driving home from doing my 5th step, and I felt good. I always said that I had this spiritual awakening driving home from doing my 5th step, and it was of a sort, but it really wasn't anything metaphysical or fantasy like or anything like that. I realized years later, looking back on it, what happened is I had never really felt good about myself. I never felt like I was that there was any hope for me. I never felt like I was a potentially good person. I always just felt like I was a rotten little bastard deep down inside. And I'm driving home from doing my inventory, and for the first time in my life, I had told somebody the truth, and I'd begin to uncover and discover the truth about me. And he helped me understand that I was not such a bad person and that there was hope for me. And I was driving home, and I started for the first time to feel good about myself. And to me, that was this major upheaval in my spiritual thinking. And it occurred to me, it wasn't a major thing, just occurred to me as I'm driving home, I wonder if they're right. I wonder if there's something to this God thing. And it put me on this spiritual quest. So for the next 14 years, that's about a year sober, then the next 14 years, and I was every single day, and my wife tell you from when she met me, I was about 5 or 6 years sober when she met me, from that time on, every single day I had something sitting next to my chair that I was reading about some type of religion, because I wanted to see how I fit in this thing. How did it apply to me, and was I a Christian or Jew or Muslim or a Buddhist or a Scientologist or a Mormon? I didn't know them, because I was not raised in any particular faith. Anybody raised in, especially like the Catholic Church, if you go study Mormonism for a while, it's like blasphemy, and you don't want your mother and dad to know, because everything has changed. But with me, nobody gave a shit what I was doing, because I didn't have anything to defend, so I was just studying everything, and I did that for 15 years, or until I was 15 or so. And I'm going to AA meetings, and I'm talking to people, and I'm listening to speakers and getting different input on it. But I'm just doing my own research, and I'm reading. And I read the Bible like a book. It was very interesting because I didn't know how else you were supposed to read it, so I just started reading at the beginning and I read it. And it was a very interesting story. And it was not what I thought it was at all. Nothing like I thought it was, from what I had heard people talk about in television. So it was very interesting. I've read it a couple times since then and still poke around in it once in a while today. But I read the Book of Mormon and on and on and on. I went to the Jewish temple for a while. I went to Catholic. I went to Christian churches, a couple of different Christian churches. I'll tell you this about the Catholic. When you go to Catholic, it takes a while. Don't plan anything for the afternoon if you go to the Catholic services. So, anyways, but I did all that stuff. And after 15 years, you know what I discovered? I didn't know a damn bit more about God than I knew when I started. I was exhausted. Have you watched the movie Forrest Gump? And Forrest gets frustrated and he can't come up with this answer that he needs, so he just starts running. And he runs across the United States, and he gets to that end and he still doesn't have the answer, so he runs back. And he just keeps doing this. And one day, he's just tired. Still doesn't have his answer, but he's just done running. And he stops, and he goes home. And that's the way my spiritual quest was. I had 15 years. When I watched Forrest Gump, as soon as I watched it, I said, that's exactly what happened to me. I did all of this searching, and one day I picked up something to read, and I realized it said the same thing that every other religious piece of literature say, because they all say exactly the same thing. If you take away the man-made, greed and power-driven ritualism that gets wrapped around everyone, at their core, they all say exactly the same thing. So there was nothing new to learn. Everybody was just trying to put a little different twist on it so they could sell a book, so they could get attention. But the message was the same at its core. All of them say the same thing, same as AA. What do we tell you to do? Be nice to each other. Quit lying and cheating, stealing. Don't sleep with your neighbor's, sponsee. Yeah, yeah. Or your husband's sponsee, yeah. Anyways, just be nice to each other. You had a choice to live in love or live in fear. And that's what all of life's about, is trying to learn how to live in love instead of constantly living in fear. So anyways, I didn't say a formal prayer, because I still didn't do that. And it's interesting, and you'll have sponsors tell you, you must get on your knees, and you must pray, and you must find a God to believe in, or you can't stay sober. And that is not true for me. It may be true for you, and I'm not judging you if you do that. And if it helps you, and if somebody's telling you to do that, listen to your sponsor. What is the worst thing that happen? You do it and it doesn't help you. Nothing worse can happen than that, right? So I don't give a shit what you do. I'm not trying to pass judgment, but I'm telling you, I didn't do that. I thought it was silliness. My sponsor asked me to get on my knees and pray, and I said no. And if I have to do that kind of shit, I'm not going to keep you as a sponsor. That's not what I'm going to do. And he said, well, whatever, let's move on. Because I was still a savage little bastard by that point. So anyways, but I heard a speaker say one time that I admire greatly. His name's Chuck C. He said he was dead long before I got sober, but I've learned more from him than every other AA member combined about spiritual growth and about life, listening to Chuck C. I think his life philosophy is better than everybody's. And most of us, all the old timers I've learned it from Chuck, and kind of was a follower of his philosophy. But he said, God is either everything or God is nothing. And if that's true, I have to believe God is everything. And if God is everything, that makes every thought and every action a prayer. So I live in constant prayer. Some days, when I'm worried or angry, I'm just praying for bad shit to happen. But it's still prayer. And he was saying that because he was given this series of talks at a men's retreat. He's 29 years sober, and he had become such a philosopher in AA and looked up to so much as a spiritual leader that they invited him to do this men's retreat. And he gave a talk on Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, and Sunday morning. So he gave a series of 5 talks. And all he did was tell a story. Like if I was to start from the beginning, which there's not enough time in 45 minutes for anybody to tell their story, really. But if I was to start from the beginning and try to tell my story, and I condensed it as fast as I could to try to get the whole thing in a nutshell for you, well, he just took that story of his, and he took his time, and he told it in 5 segments. So it was really just stretched out. Just wonderful and wonderful learning. But he didn't hold hands before and after the meetings and say a prayer. And somebody questioned that during one of the meetings. He said, Chuck, why aren't we holding hands? And he said, and then he tells that story, about God being everything or nothing, and every thought and every action is a prayer. And so when he did that, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. Finally, somebody had given me permission to just let it happen for me however it was going to happen for me, and that it was okay. And that it was okay for me not to have to do it like the strictly religious people were raised to do it, and to not fight it like the strictly atheist people did, and just be me and just find out as I went. So I did that. And I didn't say a formal prayer at the end of this 15 years of search, but if I would have, I suppose it would have sounded like this. God, I am tired of reading religious material. I've read a lot of it. And I don't know any more about you than I did when I started. So I'm going to stop reading now, and I'm just going to try to be the best AA I can be, and I'm going to leave the rest up to you. If there's more I'm supposed to know, I'm going to wait for you to reveal it to me. So you, sir, have a nice day, and let me know if you need anything from me. And I went about my business being the best AA I could be. Now, it took about 3 years of doing that with no price tag on it. Just being the best AA I could be. If a new man said, would you sponsor me? The answer is always yes. I think it's very rare I've told anybody no, I won't sponsor them. There are rare occasions, but they're very rare. And if I see somebody that looks like they need a sponsor, it's not unusual for me to walk up and say, do you have a sponsor? Great, I'm going to be your sponsor. And I just take them. And people say, well, I don't sponsor anybody because nobody's asked me. Well, it's a good thing Bill Wilson and Bob did not feel that way, because we'd all be dead right now if they did. They did not sit around in Bob's kitchen waiting for some new guy to find them. They went to the hospital and they found a new man, and they encouraged everybody to. Somewhere along the line, I don't know where that bullshit happened, but somewhere along the line, decades later, we changed and it became selfish about us. I am not going to help somebody unless they come up to me and make an effort. I'm not going to do that. But that's not what we do in AA, not the way we did in the beginning of AA, and not what I've learned to help. Rick and I kind of differ on that sometimes. We have a good, but him and I differ on a lot of stuff on the surface. We were talking the other day about it, because we're just the greatest friends. At our core, we're exactly the same at our core. We have the same beliefs about AA and everything. It's wonderful, but sometimes there are semantic differences that we enjoy bickering about. I think it's fun. He does have more time than me, so I always, bowed to him as he, when I argue with him. But anyways, so I was about 18 years sober. About 3 years later, I'm just trying to be the best sponsor I can be. I'm trying to be sponsored, trying to allow my sponsor to sponsor me. I'm trying to be the best husband I can be. And I want to say something in passing, and I'm going to circle back around this. But remember I said for my wife, when we were dating, I opened her door for her because I was being a gentleman. And when I'm trying to get laid. You remember I said that? So about 2 years ago, we've been married a long time now, about 2 years ago, over time you kind of just stop opening doors. And old Clancy, he used to tell this story about when love is new, you reach across the table for the salt. At the same time she reaches across and your fingers brush and sparks fly. And you say, oh, you first, dear. And then 10 years later you touch and say, give me the goddamn salt, There, now. That's what tends to happen with relationships, not just between men and women, just relationships tend to go like that. So not long ago, a couple years ago, I was saying something to her, and I smarted off at her about that. And my wife's just brilliant. She says, would you talk to me like that if it was our first date? And I thought about that for a second. And I came up with the only line I ever can come up with when I don't have an answer. I said, oh, yeah? Yeah, that's the best I could do. Oh, yeah? So since then, I've started opening her door again, and I try to be the husband she married, because why would I not treat her like it was our first date still? So we've been having a lot of fun the last couple of years, because every once in a while I'll remind her, would you talk to me that way if it was our first date? And there ain't a lot she can say about that one. So, but anyways, so I was about 18 years sober, just being the best AA I could be, and all of a sudden, for the first time in my sobriety, I had a true, what I consider a real deep, effectual surrender, and had a spiritual awakening to a God that's personal to me. What is that noise? If somebody is ringing me to quit talking, I am going to be so pissed off. I was in Chino last night, and this guy over here holds his phone up and says, my time's almost done. And you know what I did? I quit looking at that side of the room. I talked to this side of the room for the rest of the night because I don't like that shit. So anyways, so I don't think that was a dinger. I think that was just. I was in Atlanta one time doing that, and they had a guy like wait at Rarely Group. He held a damn stop sign up, but luckily the way the church was, there was this big wide alley or row, and there were two big rows of pews here. You know, I did the same thing to him. I just talked to this side of the room, but I eventually quit talking close to time because the secretary of that meeting had the same sponsor I did, and he's a little brown noser, and I knew he'd call him and snitch me out for going over something. But anyway, so about 18 years sober, one day I am just going about my business, and I'm not thinking about trying to find God. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just trying to be the best AA I can be, the best person I can be. And all of a sudden, it was almost like somebody drew the curtains back, and I could see the life and the existence that I had always been in, but I never could see it. It was always clouded with the humanness that I had. And I think I'd finally reached a level of surrender that I could just see what I had always known. And instantly, I knew there was a kind and loving God that was special and personal to me. And I knew there was a God that loved you absolutely every bit as much as he loves me. I just knew that was true for all of us. And I had this whole picture of how my spiritual life looks. I just knew immediately what it was. And it was all of a sudden, it was just all at once. Ever know wind blowing and flashing lights and all that crap? You know, I just knew. It was almost like somebody just flipped the lights on for me. And it was an amazing, amazing awakening, if you will. And I would say that maybe I would have questioned that in the beginning and said, I wonder if this is really true. I wonder if it's real. But days went by and weeks went by and months went by, and it stayed with me. And even though I started having some things go wrong, my family started to die off because they were older, and I lost my biological mother and my dad, and then my foster mother and dad that raised me from 12 on, you know, the ranchers, and people just started dying and things started changing. And one of my brothers died when he was 53 years old. And so life was going on, and you know what? It never rocked that awakening that I had. It just stayed there with me, and I just stayed connected to it. And I thought, man, isn't this just wonderful? This really may be the way life is supposed to be, that everybody always talks about. Maybe it's right. And if you're new, there's hope for you. It only took me 18 years. No, most people find what it took me a long time to find. They find it in their first months or years of sobriety, and they've been very happy with it. But I don't know why it was different for me. But I'm so glad that it happened, and it happened the way it did. And I'll tell you how I really came to know it was real. And I mentioned this just briefly last night. I'm giving a talk here at the end of this month too for our anniversary meeting, which I'm very excited for the Rarely Group. Which is, you know, this is a wonderful meeting, but nothing like the Rarely Group. When he lost track of who his commitment people were, I just wanted to point out that we already have ours all on our newsletter. The new names are on there and the phone numbers. I mean, any of you can find them at any time. So we're just on top of it. That's all I'm saying, fellas. You know, no judgment. I never judge. But anyways, so I mentioned this, and I'm not allowed to talk about this when my wife's present because it destroys her emotionally. She just can't do it. It's part of the reason she quit going to meetings with me when I was talking. But when I was 21 years sober, my son, Gus, who Rick knew and Derek knew, and several people in here knew him from the time he was a little baby, the boy that was born on Christmas Day that was such a great kid, he was murdered when he was in college at 21 years old. And he was brutally murdered. And I was about 6 hours from home when it happened. And if I tell this story when my wife's present, she just starts crying and then messes up her makeup, and then she gets mad at me, and then so now she just doesn't want to go. So I promised her I wouldn't tell this story January, so I'll tell it to you guys now. But anyways, I was 6 hours away from home when I got this call, and they said, my son said that, my other son, which I didn't think about until just early this year, I wonder how hard it would have had to be, it was 8 years ago, how hard would it have had to be for him to call his daddy and say, your youngest son and my brother that I love dearly was killed today. I wonder how hard that phone call was for him to make. And I never even thought about that until this year. And I finally called him earlier this year, and I said, Travis, I was just thinking about that, you know, how hard. And he said, oh, yeah, that's the most difficult phone call I ever made in my life. And I said, well, I've never really addressed that with you, you know, and talked about it. And so I really appreciate you making that call, because nobody else in the family could. They just couldn't do it. They were just too torn up. But anyways, here's what happened when I got the call. Dad, China, his girlfriend, has been killed. BJ, the boy who did it, killed them both, shot himself in the head. He was her ex. You know, he came to the college and murdered both of them, shot himself in the head. And Gus is at the hospital and we can't get any information on him. Instantly, I knew he was going to be okay whether he was alive or dead. Instantly, I knew that because I knew that he was with God and God was going to take care of him. I did think to myself, this is going to be very difficult for us. It's going to be very hard for me losing this boy because I was not done with him, and he was a good boy. He was doing all the right stuff, and we were just growing so nicely together. And I knew it was going to be hard for his mother, and it was going to be hard for his brothers. It was just going to be and his sister, going to be very, very difficult. But we're going to be able to get through this because I had faith and I knew he was okay. But here's the thing more important that Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me. The very next thought I had was, I knew the boy who had killed those kids and killed himself. I knew that boy very well. The year before, he sat at my table having Thanksgiving dinner. That's how well I knew him. All of our kids hung out together. My second thought was, I wonder how spiritually tormented that boy must have been to take an action so severe. Now, that is Alcoholics Anonymous. That is what we learn here, to have compassion and love. Now, that's been 8 years ago, and I still feel that way today. I've never carried any anger towards him or his family. Back in the day, like so many of us, what I would have wanted to do was kill him again and then murder his entire family so they could never have another kid. That's the way I was when I was pre-Alcoholics Anonymous. But AA, I couldn't imagine hurting anybody today. I just don't have any want to do that. I know God wouldn't want me to do that. You don't want me to do that, do you? Nobody wants me to do that, and we don't want you to do it. Our job here is to learn how to live in love. You guys taught me that, and that was the proof to me that I was starting to learn the lesson. I think there's so much more to learn, but I was starting to learn the lesson, and I have lived in love from that point till this. Now, I would like to say that I walk on water most of the time, float from time to time with a halo over my head, but it's not true. I'm just a normal human being, and my old sponsor that just died, Clancy, he was right when he said we never rise above human being. Human beings are wonderful, except when they're acting awful. And they are very kind and patient and generous, except when they're being petty and greedy. And you could just get every scope of emotion, that's what we are. And he said the reason HALT, and is it on the wall right there? HALT, is it in here anywhere? That saying, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired? Should be, it's AA Club. He said the reason that statement is so important is that if we get too hungry, we get too angry, we get too lonely, or too tired, it will distort our perception of reality, and that's when our humanness will come out. And that's why we have to protect ourselves from those. Not that they're bad things, they're perception distorters. And remember the Wizard of Oz or black and white? If we want to live in Oz and Technicolor, we better make sure we don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, and we do the work we're supposed to do here so we can stay living in Technicolor as I do. Thank you.